are looking at Aristotelian virtue ethics with Dimick and Fisher. And Dimick and Fisher start out with a quote by a man named Ivan Panin. And Ivan Panin was a mathematician in the late 19th century who, oddly enough, wrote about the design of the Bible to be understood mathematically. But that's not why we're looking at him. We're looking at him for just this specific quote: "To seek virtue for the sake of reward is to dig iron with a spade of gold." And this is a way in which we're referencing virtue ethics to be understood in a non-consequential way. In other words, you're doing good and you're being virtuous non-consequentially, as opposed to doing good and being virtuous for a result. Okay, and so in that sense, you want to be good for the sake of being good, not being good for some sort of reward, is the idea. And when we look at virtue ethics, we of course focus on Aristotle, who was an ancient Greek philosopher who was born in 384 BC and dies in 322 BC. And we're looking also at the way in which he based his ethical theory on the what's called his practical ethics, and also a way in which we are focused on our character. And character there, the Greek word for character is ethos, and also too, we need to see that this is a very technical point that we also need to resolve with Dimick and Fisher. In other words, we don't want to make the mistake that Dimick and Fisher do, because they want to see that actions are to be different, our ethical actions are to be differentiated from our character, and they're doing so by way of differentiating types of ethical theories. And what we want to do is focus on this idea that character development from a non-consequentialist perspective, and likewise from the perspective of a virtue ethicist, is to be understood in relation to actions. In other words, the way to develop your character is by way of actions. And so when you cut out this idea that virtue ethics is understood not by actions, but by the way in which you're fostering a good character, you can't foster a good character without working on your actions. So I want you to make that distinction to understand that this is just one little problem with the way in which Dimick and Fisher present virtue ethics that we need to be super careful with as well. Basically, you could think that Dimick and Fisher forgot to send me their manuscript before they published it so that I could help them with the editing, because they were unaware of the fact that I would be teaching it in a class. And also, Aristotle was a teleologist. So for Aristotle, everything has a telos, purpose, good, or aim of some kind, okay? And so when something is good, it is close to its telos and or its function. So for example, when an apple is ripe and tastes good, this is an example of a good apple. When man-made things are good and made well, they are functioning or fulfilling, so forgive me for the personification there, but they are fulfilling their telos. And in a way, we want to see that personification, at least in that instance, as not a mistake, because in a way it is something that, because Aristotle was a proto-scientist, he also has the issue where he's attributing anthropocentric views onto non-sentient things. And so that's the result of this teleology. But the important thing about the teleology that is not mistaken as far as Aristotle is concerned is this idea that when we are gearing ourselves toward living a good life, that is also representative of our function and also our telos. And eudaimonia is also important for the Aristotelian in the sense that to be a practitioner of virtue ethics, to focus on how it is that you are a good character in terms of excellence, is also to practice virtue ethics. And this is a big point that Aristotle has in reference to his famous book on ethics, otherwise known as the Nicomachean Ethics. And so for Aristotle, it is good to live as people according to our function by way of reasoning, in the way that we are aimed toward eudaimonia as people, okay? And it's not just reasoning in the abstract. We're seeing this as a way in which we reason in order to act and develop our character, to develop our virtuous character in accordance, like I say, with our actions. And so to do this is to work on our ethos, according to Aristotle. And so eudaimonia, in other words, it's understood as a way that we're aimed at establishing a good life or a life of flourishing, is not to be mistaken for momentary happiness. So because usually we think of momentary happiness as ephemeral and fleeting. So if eudaimonia is our aim, our eudaimonia is a way in which we reach and understand ourselves rationally and cognitively, while we rationally are acting in accordance to our reason. Why is it that we reason in our ethos? To lead a good life, according to Aristotle. So we use our mind and body to bring about goodness and virtue. And so this is one of the reasons why we refer to ethics as a practical philosophy, because it's a way in which we are practicing in our lives to be good people. In other words, an establishment of virtue for us is also a way in which we are practical. So our authors, Dimick and Fisher, identify virtue theory as a moral theory, and this is also to be distinguished from these problems that they are making with agent-centered theory versus act-centered theory. And all you really need to do there is just recognize that virtue ethics is actually both. It's a way in which we're focused on developing our character in terms of our agency, and likewise the way in which we are focused on our actions as well. Okay, so this is incredibly important. And then also Aristotle's virtue ethics is agent-centered, as we pointed out, and it's also a way in which we are focused on our actions. And so in this sense, we are seeing that virtue is a way in which we're understanding an excellence of character. To act virtuously is also to observe excellence of our character in ourselves and likewise in other people. The way in which we understand virtue is by the examples of other people. And then also to do so is a way in which we're working through virtue habitually. So in other words, habit is important in the sense that we are establishing our character through repeated actions of virtue. And then we look at the most important feature of Aristotelian virtue ethics, and that is the golden mean. And so with the golden mean, we also don't want to confuse that with the golden rule, and we want to see the golden mean as a way in which Aristotle was picturing an establishment of reason in which we are acting. So the golden mean is then a way in which we are looking at a deficiency on one side of the golden mean, or a privation of virtue. And then on the other side of the golden mean, we're focused on an excess of action, or likewise a way in which we're understanding an excess of action in terms of overstepping our virtue. And so, of course, we see this as a management of virtue, more or less. So, like for example, with courage, we see that the mean is courage, and the privation or the deficiency is cowardice, and then the excess of courage is the way in which we are acting rashly or hastily in terms of the excess. And so the mean there is courage, and then the mean there then means a way in which we are virtuous. It's to signify that. And then what you're thinking of there too is that as I organize that, or the organization of how that's understood is rational. And so, of course, we see this as our aiming toward this as a way in which we are managing our virtue, more or less as a balancing of privation and excesses. So this balancing must be recognized most importantly as a rational way in which we do this. In other words, what is rational is also structural. So rational acts are organized and recognized by way of understanding the golden mean cognitively, whereby the virtue is recognized and measured as a golden mean between two vices, to a deficiency and an excess, right? Or a privation and an excess. So the golden mean of courage is a way in which we just outlined, having to do with the difference between cowardice and then the difference between how it is that we are hasty. And also too, Dimick and Fisher also point out that such rational thinking is an act, and likewise something to be developed in a way to get to eudaimonia. So such behaviors of life are therefore understood simply as habits. And what we need to think of there with the habits is that we're not focused on just living on instinct or by just doing something over and over without thinking about it. We are doing something by way of habit, or we are living a virtuous life by way of habit, specifically in terms of how it is that we are reasoning, okay? It's not something, because students often want to suggest that because it's habitual, that means that we're just living on instinct. But remember that just living on instinct is to be differentiated from how it is that we're leading a reasonable life. Because we could also see that in an old-fashioned sense by recognizing that typically we see animals living just on instinct. And these days we could challenge that a little bit, but at least in this case, we could see that that's then to be differentiated by how it is that we act by reason. And also too, habit is a way in which we're understanding repeated actions, and we want to see that repetition as inherently valuable, because the way in which we learn about things, especially like in college, for instance, in college, we repeat actions over and over again in order to attain excellence, and likewise even excellence of character, to be virtuous, right? To be a good student also is to work on your virtue, and likewise to work on becoming a better person in terms of eudaimonia. And then also too, we could see a corollary there to religious practice. In other words, when we're thinking about the way in which people recognize themselves in terms of religious practice, we are also focused on how it is that they do this in terms of repeated actions by way of ritualized behavior is also characteristic of the religious experience. And we see that there's a corollary there to Aristotle's insistence on the way in which we attain excellence of character is through habit. And so we do all of these things, hopefully by way of working on our intellect practically and habitually. And not only our intellect, but also the way in which we are directing our bodies as well. So virtue ethics is understood as encapsulated by three aspects of action: intellectual excellence, practical excellence, and also habitual excellence, right? And so also, to lead a virtuous life is never something that is understood strictly intellectually. It's understood in tandem with habitual practice. In other words, you don't want to get to thinking that it's just about how it is that you're thinking. In other words, we don't just think about being good people. We don't just do that. We also have to gear ourselves and likewise our bodies to be good people. In other words, it's going with that old saying, actions are louder than words. So our actions and our habits define us in terms of our character. The way in which you identify someone's character is not simply by what they say. As a matter of fact, when what people say and what they do are contradictory, that's where we want to challenge how it is that we understand their character as good, right? And so the development and skill of habit is a way in which we are aiming for virtue to achieve eudaimonia. So in other words, you want to see eudaimonia not as a static state, but something in which you are aiming toward, okay? So I aim to live a good life by way of my actions, but that's not necessarily a guarantee that I'm going to arrive there. And also, too, a way in which we are practicing with wisdom is understood for Aristotle as phronesis, to be understood as practical wisdom or practical know-how, a way in which we are practically implementing or applying our wisdom to everyday life. And we also learn about the ways in which to be virtuous, not just by the golden mean, but also by way of learning from other people's examples. Because we are in a social sphere. Aristotle identified us as zoon politikon. In other words, we are political creatures, or even more plainly, we are communal creatures. And in that sense, we learn how to act by way of observing others' behavior, and we wish to live our lives that are emblematic of good behavior by learning from the examples of others, learning the habits of people that are good or that we see as emblematic of good character. And so I think that's a good start to get us on how it is that we understand virtue ethics by way of Aristotle, and we'll take it from there to focus on the way in which we are reasonable by way of the golden mean. So thank you, and also we'll talk more. Have a fantastic